Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission by Natalia of her horse Luna. Luna is a 5-year-old thoroughbred Frisian cross, which is an interesting cross to make. Um, Very often these kind of crosses really don't turn out too well because they end up with sort of too many parts of different kinds of horses. Though this one seems to have turned out quite well. She's had the horse for about a little over a year. Started out with the lunging inside reins and then switched to the shambone, and now she has the horse lunging without anything whatsoever and getting her to stretch quite well, which is just what we're looking for. So by all means, folks, when we can get rid of the side reins and the shambone, we want to. That's what we do. And when horses learn to stretch, they're quite happy to do it. Once they find out that they can move in a comfortable manner and be relaxed about their work, they're more than happy to stretch. So seems to be what this one is doing. So very nice here, starting off in the walk. She started to stretch there a little bit deeper, but it's a good active walk. And you can see that this horse will really need this work. Like most Frisians, what she did get from the Frisian is the long back, which is the problem with a lot of Frisians. As I say, very often we see very large people buying them thinking that they're going to be able to carry their weight. But what we find is with the length of the horse's back with Frisians is that they collapse, and of course the size of them as well. The weight of their own body draws them down. So we have to take a lot of time working these horses over their backs, especially if we're going to put heavy weight on them because their backs will tend to collapse. And that sounds like where this one was at. Natalia says that the horse was being ridden way too high up and hollow and resisting. So she's gone back to the very beginning with it, which is what we need to do with these horses. Doing a great job of lunging here. I like how the horse is staying out in a nice big large circle. Nice active rhythmic walk. And then when it does stretch like that, it looks really good. She looks a little high there sometimes. But you seem to be getting the job done. And once again, I applaud the fact that you don't have any side reins or lunge line, or rather side reins on the horse. Good stretch down there, getting better all the time and active. Yeah, I like that. Now that's quite nice there. And once again, so interesting to watch horses. Once again, watching the back end is what we should be looking at. Watch how it affects the back end as the horse stretches down, how much more easily the horse can stay in the rhythm of the walk, and also how much deeper the track will be from the hind leg over the track of the front foot. That is, it will be overreaching. So getting an eye for that and just what it changes, there's a beautiful walk like that. And once again, look, so she stretches all the way down there. All of a sudden, hocks start being picked up a little more. Step gets a little rounder. Remember, when we're talking about round, we're talking about the whole length of the horse's top line. In the center there, just behind the withers, the horse should pull its back up in time. That can only happen if we let the horse develop in the stretch. That's why so few horses are really in correct collection today, because they must go through that change of the body in order to really collect. That is, remember, collection means to lower the three joints of the hind legs and to the degree to which they maintain that lowering. It is not shortening the steps, as so many people today seem to believe. So that was a good walk that we had going, quite nice. Most of the time she was stretching quite nicely into it. And when you go into the trot work, once again there, it looks like you're bringing her back to the walk. But even that stretch, trot work there rather, immediately got into the stretch and looked really good. Once again, good walk here as you've brought her back. And always remember, why does my horse break into the trot? Well, they break into the trot because it's easier to do a bad trot than to do a good walk for the horse. So in the beginning, when we're trying to get them to figure out what it is that we want, if they break in, we have to just gradually bring them back, ask them to come back to the walk so they understand that we want a more active walk with a bigger step rather than a trot, so to speak. Also important why when we ride the walk, we use our legs alternately. That is, as we feel the inward swing of the horse's back from side to side, your legs naturally will swing in. You follow that inward swing. That times your leg gait with the time that the hind leg on that same side is about to step up and forward. So the horse can then differentiate between the aid to trot when we use our legs or calves together. Good stretch in this walk here, really, really nice. And once again, see how long this horse is in the back. But you've done a good job of starting this work. You can see her back, as you said, has already improved quite a bit, and that will continue to do that. And this horse, while it looks a little long in the back, what will happen is from the stretching, you'll see that the horse will start to look more compact, so to speak, and look kind of more like its parts come from the same kind of horse. It's often this case when we breed these kind of horses together, like a Frisian and a Thoroughbred, which have very different elements to them. Frisians generally have big sloping shoulders that the neck come almost straight out of. Thoroughbreds do not. They have more of a neck that kind of goes straight up forward, which this horse has. This horse kind of has a Frisian back and the Thoroughbred neck. But once again, not so long that's ever going to be a problem. And as you strengthen that, you can see this horse when it trots, at the moment, looks a little downhill. That is, it looks like its hips are a little higher than the shoulders. So what you're going to find with this type of work is when we do this correct work, it's going to pull the shoulders up through the withers, and the horse is going to get a little more uphill stance. And every horse will change that way to some degree, others a little more than others, depending on their conformation. But they will all go through that change. And once again, you really can't get correct collection until they go through that change. That is, the withers have pulled up through the shoulders, and now the horse has a more uphill appearance. But getting the trot work, this is good. Once again, stretching quite nicely without the use of shambone or side reins or anything else. Right there is about where you'd like the horse to be. Quite nice. And you're doing a great job of keeping the horse at the end of the line, exactly right. You're staying at the top of the triangle formed by the whip in your right hand and your rein in the other side. That's exactly what we want to see. So I'm liking everything I'm seeing about this today. Nice stretch in the trot there. That's really good. Get it to that place. Now, once the horse starts to stretch a little deeper and consistently, then we can let the horse slow the rhythm just a little bit. In other words, we're always looking for the trot that is the deepest trot, that is the most engaged from behind. Remember, forward means to engage forward into the body. So the most engaged trot that we can get, then we start to slow that down. So we're looking for the trot with the fewest footfalls that covers the most ground, in other words. So the slowest tempo that maintains that longest possible stride. So again, very good in the stretch there. So what you're going to see, this horse hasn't yet developed much thrust. Remember, thrust is the degree to which the horse pushes off the ground with its hind legs and propels itself forward. But you will see that develop, and as the horse begins to slow down and stays deep, you'll see the horse over time beginning to lift its front end, will start to look lighter all by itself. Just got to remember that we can never pull a horse into lightness. All you can do by pulling on the front end of a horse is to slow them down, which is why we see so many hollowed horses in the dressage ring these days that have been forced against the hand. And once again, once we understand what dressage really is, we can see that there's such a difference in how horses are being trained and shown. We're seeing, so many of these very expensive horses that are going extremely hollow, and yet scoring very high. Now, happily, we have Charlotte Dargin these days, and of course, she's doing very well. The World Cup is going on as I'm speaking here, and and her scores are starting to reflect a difference in the score. I know the first round there in Las Vegas of this World Cup, she was 6 or 8 points ahead of the next person behind her. So we're starting to see more differentiation in the scores. For instance, the last Olympic Games when she scored so well, the horse that came in second by only a margin of a point was very forced against the hand, tense throughout the entire test, broken at the third vertebrae. The girl roll-curved the horse going around the ring in front of the judges, and yet the score was only, a percentage of a point difference. Now we're starting to see the judges are beginning to place her horse, which is so correctly worked. And once again, if you watch Charlotte Desjardins, you'll see how the hindquarters stay lowered throughout the test, even through the canter work. The horse maintains collection throughout, and that's why, and relaxation, which is why she's scoring so high. And that's what we want to see people emulate, rather than, the silly dressage where horses are hollow and snapping their legs up, which basically does nothing but lead to lameness. Remember, at the very core of dressage is that idea that we're doing the best thing for the horse. We're developing the horse slowly and methodically through gymnastic exercises that keep the horse sound for years and years and years. I mean, today you wonder what did people do 20 years ago before they had all these joint injections and these kind of things that they can now get away with. You know, it's pretty simple in most cases. I won't say in every case, but in most cases, if your horse doesn't have enough joint fluid, it's not producing enough joint fluid, in most cases because you're wearing the horse out. So many people today override their horses, overwork them. They don't do the flat work to get them working over their backs correctly so that they can distribute the weight more correctly and have less impact on their joints. So remember, that is our goal. Our goal is creating a horse that's easy to ride. That's the point of correct dressage work, that isn't freaking out. You know, people will say very often that, you know, they can't ride an advanced level horse because the horse is too sensitive. Well, a horse like that has been scared into movements. You know, a correctly trained dressage horse is very calm. I could put, you know, anybody on our more advanced horses, and the horse is not going to freak out because someone has a little tense leg. But a horse that's been trained by tension, you know, and always being beaten into everything is going to be freaked out. So yes, that kind of horse becomes very complicated. But you're doing a great job of uncomplicating this one that you're working with. Really good through all that lunging work. I was very happy with all of that. You know, once again, as she starts to go, and once again here, really nice stretch. And that's really a good active trot. And what you're going to see is, once again, sometimes she looks a little bit too fast. And what we want to do is, once we find that optimal, you know, position of the stretch there, is then try to let the horse slow down just a little bit. But that's really a good stretch. And the horses will begin to slow down all by themselves once you get them over the back. You'll just naturally see the horse beginning to develop more suspension. That is, the horse is lifting off the ground in true suspension. Not the phony suspension that we see so often in the dressage ring today, where horses have been crammed into the frame, which makes them float in this kind of quasi-passage looking trot, you know, that people who don't understand what collection is, including many of the judges today, will score very high. But if they had any real education, they would look at the horses and see how collapsed they are through the back, and how tented their hips are, so to speak. They have those what we call hunter bumps, where they've been ridden so short, you know. So when we see that in a dressage horse, we know very well that this horse hasn't been doing dressage. In fact, it's just been forced into a phony frame. Really good walk here. I watched some videos last week of somebody training horses in Europe, and they were pontificating all this stuff, but they were riding around with a warm-up cooler blanket over the top of the horse, and the horse looked like a big, beautiful horse, and the woman is pontificating all this nonsense, and then she stops and takes the blanket off, and this was supposed to be an upper-level horse, and the horse literally looked like it was sway-backed with a huge hunter's bump, and this is somebody who's proclaiming that they're doing classical dressage. Well, nothing could have been further. Once again, all you need to do is see the muscling of a horse to know how it's been trained. Look at its back. The back is collapsed, and you know, the horse is all built up at, you know, on the underside of the neck, and it has a hunter bump. That is that shortened bump over the top of the horse's hips that we see often. Tells you exactly how the horse has been trained and not in dressage. So really good stretch here. This is developing absolutely beautifully. I love how everything is happening here. So again, you're doing a great job with this. Really good rhythm. I really look forward to seeing your next video of the horse under saddle. But everything I'm seeing here on the lunge line, you've gotten right on track. Once again, you've done away with the side reins and shambone. Obviously, you don't need any of that. And that's what we want to do, everyone, you know. These tools that help us get the horse into the stretch sometimes, you know, once again, once the horse learns it, the horse goes just like this. Once again, proving how, you know, people talk about natural horsemanship. Well, this is how a horse naturally moves correctly. So we're helping the horse to regain its natural posture, so to speak, that's been lost by bad riding or being cooped up in pens. You know, once again, we talk about raising young horses and why so many horses today fall apart when people start training them. A, they're not training them correctly to start with over their backs, but you know, if you've raised a horse in your backyard in a 24 by 24 pen, you're going to have to be very careful training that horse because it will not have developed correctly. And once again, how important this work that we're doing to help those kinds of horses. You know, here in California, hardly anybody has any pastures. Looks like where you are there they do, but where we are, you know, and we had a big spate of people raising horses back in the 80s, and happily that's mostly disappeared because people in California realize that you just can't raise horses that way, and you start to train them and they just fall apart. It's like a kid who's sat on the couch his whole life watching TV. They start to do sports and everything falls apart. So it takes some time. But this is a beautiful stretch that you're doing here. This is exactly right, exactly what we're looking for. And if you can translate that, you know, to under saddle work, you'll really be doing well. And you said you're having trouble with your saddle, and highly understand that. We see it all the time. Friesians can be quite hard to fit. Really take a look at my wife's saddle fitting lecture. So I know you said you're in an area where there's not a lot of good saddle fitters. So You have to be very careful because lots of people say their things, but then we realize after the fact, after they've lamed your horse, with a bad fitting saddle, we find out too late. So it sounds like you've already found out. So once again, you are better off continuing doing what you're doing here until you find a saddle that's going to fit this horse and not cause it more problems by being too tight at the withers. So I highly recommend you watch my wife's saddle fitting lecture, just so you really know. If you have an idea like that, you'll be able to evaluate and probably do a better job of fitting your own saddle than going through the so-called saddle fitters who come out and plop a saddle on and say, oh, it looks fantastic. We had a case here in Los Angeles recently where a saddle fitter came, told the woman the saddle was perfect for the horse and drove away, and the saddle was not, and it took her 2 years to get her money back from the people, but she finally did. But only after having 2 veterinarians write into the people talking about how much damage the saddle was doing to the horse. So once again, watch my wife's video and you'll probably do a better job doing it yourself than you would going through the saddle fitter. Because you're certainly doing a good job at everything else here. So if you can understand this much, you should have no problem with the saddle issue. And once again, the biggest thing, and especially for the bigger horses, is that the channel, down the center of the saddle be wide enough to sit off of the tendons and ligaments that lie alongside of the spine. So be sure you take a look at that in any saddle you're considering. Be sure that it has plenty of room and that the saddle is not sitting on top of the horse's either spine or the ligaments that run right next to the spine. If you don't know how to find that, once again, watch my wife's saddle fitting lecture and she'll tell you. So everything here is just going really, really great. I really look forward to seeing this horse under saddle. You've done a really good job of the groundwork so far. So all you need to do now is get your saddle worked out, and this horse looks like it's coming along beautifully. As she said, she's already had this, her chiropractor or veterinarian examine the horse's back, and the horse has been developing really nicely. Excuse my dogs barking in the background there. So once again, this is all looking really good. We're stretching into the contact. She gets back down there. Really good walk work. And I like how you're coming back to the walk work, and that's certainly a very good thing to do. Remember, we always want to begin and end in the walk. Every session, whether it's on the lunge line or whether it's under saddle. Keep the horse stretching there. And come back to a good walk. So no matter how high a horse's level of training is, we still start and end at the same place with the horse stretched all the way down. So a Grand Prix horse is going to begin and end at the exact same place that a younger, more inexperienced horse, or a horse that we're just beginning back in training, is going to. We're all going to start at the same place. We're simply going to bring them up as far as they can each day, as you hear us talk about. And once again, we don't just stay in the stretch forever. Once we get the horse to stretch all the way down, then we start bringing the horse up as to the degree that we can. Once again, without shortening the neck back, as you've seen us. That's what's so important, is to get the idea of raising the head and neck a little bit and pull, but without pulling back and taking tension backwards on the horse's mouth. This is what we need to do. So really good walk here. Very nice. So you've done a great job with this. I really look forward to seeing the next one that you send in of the horse under saddle as soon as you get that worked out. And once again, as you see, as this horse develops top line, when we see the horse now, we can see the horse looks a little long in the back and looks a little downhill. But keep watching this horse, because you're going to see that change as that neck gets stretched out and begins to be brought higher. That is, it can carry its neck higher. You're going to have that neck really stretched out, and you're going to see this horse is going to become more proportioned looking, so to speak, and the front end's going to come up, withers will pull up through the shoulders, and the horse will have a very different look a year from now than what you have now. So really great job here. Keep up the good work, and I look very much forward to seeing the next session with you. But everything here is just going as well as it could possibly go. So really, really great job. Look forward to seeing you next time. It's Will Faerber at Art to Ride.